Okay, let's dive right in. Imagine the Indian subcontinent, maybe early 19th century.
Right, a really complex picture.
Exactly. A vast place,
Yeah.
loads of cultures, different powers.
Yeah.
But you have this massive empire, the Mughals, kind of starting to fray at the edges. It's a landscape in flux.
An empire definitely in decline, yeah. And new forces are, well, they're making their moves.
And this sets the stage for huge changes. For many people, it was this critical moment to sort of redefine who they were, what they stood for.
Hmm.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into this really pivotal time. We're focusing specifically on these powerful socio-religious movements that bubbled up from the chaos. Figures like Sayyid Ahmad Shaheed really leading the charge.
Yeah, and what's so interesting, I think, is how these early struggles, even the ones that, ended in military defeat,
Mm-hmm.
they weren't just failures. Not at all.
Okay.
They actually planted these deep seeds of social awakening, religious revival. They got communities thinking, organizing, and really forging a distinct sense of identity.
So even in defeat, something else was growing.
Precisely. These movements, they were rooted in this really strong desire for revival, for reform, and they laid this critical groundwork for ideas that would just echo for decades, fundamentally shaping what came next.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive isn't just about listing battles or dates.
No.
We want to get underneath that, understand the beliefs, the surprisingly sophisticated ways they organized, the ideologies driving them.
And how it all connects to the identities and the politics we see later on.
Exactly. And how it contributed to, well, the world we recognize today. We're pulling from historical accounts, academic work, even some older archival stuff to try and bring this really vibrant period to life for you.
It's a fascinating slice of history.
Okay, so let's maybe set that stage a bit more. The Mughal Empire. For centuries, they were the power.
Absolutely dominant, unquestionably.
But by this point, early 19th century, it's clearly fading. Our sources talk about it being this slow process, maybe nearly 150 years after Emperor Aurangzeb died back in 1707.
Yeah, it wasn't like a switch was flipped. It was a long, slow unraveling. So what were those first signs? What were the cracks appearing in this, once seemingly invincible structure?
Good question. What was starting to go wrong?
Well, several things, really. One big factor was just the sheer size of the empire. It was huge, incredibly diverse, making effective administration, real centralized control. That got harder and harder.
Just too big to manage effectively.
Pretty much. And then you add in what our sources call a succession of weak administrators and even pleasure-seeking emperors after Aurangzeb. He was the last of the really strong Mughals.
Right.
After him, there wasn't a clear rule for who takes over, so you get constant infighting, brutal power struggles between heirs.
Which must have paralyzed everything.
Absolutely. It created this continuous dislocation of administrations, as one source puts it. Governance just ground to a halt in many areas. And the nobility themselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's talk of them kind of degenerating, becoming complacent, more interested in luxury than, ruling or fighting.
So internal decay, really. A failure of leadership cascading down.
It really highlights how even the mightiest empires can be weakened from within, doesn't it?
Definitely. And it wasn't just weak successors, was it? Aurangzeb himself, his policies, they played a part too. It feels like that classic tension between maybe ideology and the practicalities of running a diverse empire.
Oh, absolutely. His reign is a powerful lesson there. His religious policies were, well, divisive is putting it mildly.
Like the jizya tax.
Exactly. Bringing back the jizya, that tax on non-Muslims, it alienated a huge chunk of the Hindu population. And then there was the destruction of Hindu temples, discouraging Hindu festivals.
Actions that would definitely create resentment.
Massive resentment. Sources talk about injustice, hatred, resentment, and disloyalty. It fundamentally fractured the social cohesion that an empire like that desperately needed.
So you've got internal political weakness and now social division growing.
And then layer on top the economic strain. Aurangzeb spent fortunes on, well, luxurious palaces, but also on these incredibly costly, long military campaigns. Especially those wars in the Deccan against the Marathas. They dragged on for years.
Draining to the treasury.
Completely draining it. So high taxes, a struggling economy, social resentment, weak leadership. It's a perfect storm, really. Discontent was bound to boil over. Rebellions became almost inevitable.
And this created, well, a power vacuum, didn't it? A huge void right at the center. And nature abhors a vacuum.
Precisely. As Mughal power faded, others saw their chance. Local rebellions gained real strength. Groups like the Marathas, the Rajputs, the Sikhs groups that had often been kept down, they rose up with their own armies, challenging the empire directly.
And the Mughal army couldn't cope.
It had become worn and inefficient, is how one source describes it. Lacked the skills, the motivation, the modern techniques needed. Meanwhile, while all this internal chaos is happening...
Into the British.
Exactly. The British East India Company, they were playing a very smart, very strategic long game. They were well-planned, equipped, and determined, as the sources say, to take advantage of the weak political and administrative situation.
Came as traders, stayed as rulers.
That's the classic story. And for many people in the subcontinent, watching this ancient power crumble and this new foreign power rise, it must have felt like an existential crisis. India's wealth, its strategic position, it was all up for grabs.
Okay, so it's into this landscape, crumbling old power, rising new threat, internal chaos that a different kind of leader emerges, someone offering a path forward.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. Amidst all this, Sayyid Ahmad Shaheed steps onto the scene. Sources say he was from Rai Bareilly, modern Uttar Pradesh. What was his core message? What kind of movement did he spark in the 1820s?
Well, Sayyid Ahmad Shaheed, born around 1786, he looked at the situation, the decline of Muslim power, the social fragmentation, and he had a very specific diagnosis.
Which was?
He believed the root cause wasn't just political weakness. It was fundamentally that Muslims were, in his view, ignoring the Islamic principles. They'd become divided, Sunni versus Shia, and had adopted practices he saw as corruptions, sometimes absorbed from Hinduism by converts.
So a spiritual failing leading to worldly decline.
That was his core belief. He felt the community was disunited and under threat, not just from the British, but also closer to home, from the Sikhs in Punjab and the Marathas. His movement, which some historians call the Wahhabi movement, though that's a bit of a debated label.
Why debated?
Well, it connects his ideas to the movement in Arabia, emphasizing purification and a return to early Islam. He didn't use the term himself, but it points to that reformist, maybe even puritanical focus. His was a broad socio-religious movement.
Okay, so more than just prayer meetings.
Oh, much more. The goal was to restore Muslim power and purity, attack the religious corruption, get people back to what he saw as authentic Islamic practice, especially given the influence of non-Islamic customs.
So a religious leader, yes, but stepping right into that political and social void we talked about. It makes sense people would listen, given the uncertainty. How did he plan to achieve this revival? What were his methods?
His approach was really multi-pronged, very systematic. His religious services, as they're called, covered a lot of ground. He heavily emphasized on Islam teachings, really pushing people to follow the Sunnah and Hadith of Prophet's practices and sayings as the guide for life.
Back to basics, in a way.
In a way, yes. And he clarified what he saw as the importance of jihad. Now, in his context, this wasn't just an internal spiritual struggle. It very clearly included armed struggle against oppression, specifically targeting the Sikh rule in Punjab at that time.
So a call to arms was part of it from early on.
Definitely. But he also focused on education and accessibility. He translated the Quran into Persian, which was still a major language of the educated elite, and his sons later did an Urdu translation. That opened up the scripture enormously.
Making it directly accessible.
Right. And he wrote 51 books, apparently, in Persian and Arabic, works like Hujjatullah ul-Baligha. He even wrote a history of the first 4 caliphs designed to appeal to both Shias and Sunnis, trying to bridge those sectarian divides.
That's interesting, actively trying to unify.
Yes, unity was a key theme against the fragmentation he saw. So this wasn't just about personal piety. It had a very clear political goal. Establish Muslim Raj, resist oppression, particularly where Muslim peasants were suffering under Hindu or British landlords.
It sounds like a really comprehensive blueprint for changing society, but also one that seems almost destined for conflict.
It certainly was.
And that led directly to military action, didn't it? The most famous clash being the Battle of Balakot.
Exactly. Bareilly's interpretation of jihad led him to declare it against the Sikhs, who controlled Punjab and were seen as oppressing Muslims there. He set up his main base in the Peshawar Valley.
And gathered followers.
Yes. He was widely respected for his piety, and he attracted many followers, including disgruntled peasants, artisans, people feeling squeezed by the changes happening. But it wasn't smooth sailing. He faced internal challenges, too.
Like what?
Well, sources mention a betrayal and massacre of his companions on the hands of Pashtun tribesmen in late 1830. That forced him to relocate from Peshawar up towards Hazara, possibly aiming for Kashmir.
And that's where the Sikhs caught up with him.
That's right. On May 6, 1831, Sikh forces, led by Prince Sher Singh, found his camp in the Balakot Valley. They besieged the valley and attacked his camp at night.
A surprise attack.
It seems so. The battle apparently lasted all day, but the result was a clear Sikh victory. And tragically for the movement, Sayyid Ahmad Shaheed himself, his key lieutenant Shah Ismail Delvi, and hundreds of their followers were killed in the fighting.
A really decisive military defeat then. Crushing.
Militarily, yes, absolutely crushing. But what's striking when you look closer is the level of organization that underpinned the whole thing. It wasn't just a spontaneous mob.
Right, you touched on that. It sounds like there was some serious planning behind the scenes, even if the battle was lost. What does that organization tell us?
It's genuinely fascinating and maybe not as widely known. The sources suggest the Wahhabi movement's organization was actually much better planned, organized, and knitted than the revolt of 1857, which came later.
Really? Better than the 57 mutiny?
In terms of its internal structure and long-term planning, yes. Barelvi had appointed 4 key deputies, his Khalifa's guys named Wilayat Ali, Inayat Ali, Muhammad Hussein, Farhat Hussein. Their job was to travel the country, preach, recruit, basically stir up support against the Sikhs and, increasingly, the British.
So a network of preachers and organizers.
Exactly. And after Barelvi's death at Balakot, the movement didn't just collapse. Patna, down in Bihar, became this central hub. They had a committee meeting every Friday night, planning jihad, managing funds, supporting their base camp up on the frontier at Saitana.
Wow. So it continued even after the leader was gone.
It did, for decades. And the logistics were incredible. They set up rest houses at regular intervals along the routes recruits took to the frontier. These weren't just places to sleep. They had lists of contacts, sympathetic mosques, ensuring recruits could travel maybe 2,000 miles in secret.
That's amazing foresight for that era, almost like an underground railroad.
It really was a pre-modern resistance network.
So how on earth did they fund all this? Maintaining camps, supporting travelers, presumably weapons? That cost money?
Their financial system was just as clever. They had the standard Islamic charity, zakat, but they added other levies. Oshur, which was like a tithe on farm produce, maybe 1 seer per mond, and muthia.
Muthia.
Yeah, it literally means a handful. The idea was each family member would put aside a handful of rice at every meal. Then every Friday it was collected by the local mullah. Small amounts, but collected consistently from many people, it added up.
Grassroots funding.
Absolutely. And they were careful. Money, sometimes gold coins, gold mohurs, was sent via private messengers. Intercepted letters show they used code words like large stones for gold mohurs, small stones for silver rupees to hide the transfers.
That's incredible. Real clandestine operations. Covering huge distances too, you said.
Yeah, funds traveling not less than 2,000 miles from places like Bengal all the way up to the northwest frontier. Recruits were trained, often at a place called Sadikpur near Patna, then sent out as agents. And they'd often take up normal jobs, tailors, booksellers, butchers as cover.
A historical spy network, basically. It shows such deep commitment, doesn't it, to build and maintain that kind of structure against such odds.
It really does. It speaks volumes about the power of that ideology, that shared purpose.
Now, the sources also mention some violence, even accusations of terrorism, linked to individuals the British thought were connected. Sure. How did the authorities deal with this persistent underground movement?
Well, there were some high-profile attacks. The Chief Justice in Calcutta, Justice Norman, was killed by a man named Abdullah. And later, the Viceroy himself, Lord Mayo, was assassinated by Sher Ali Afridi in the Andaman Islands.
And the British linked these to the Wahhabis.
They tried, but the sources are quite clear that careful inquiry failed to show any grounds for such a suspicion connecting Abdullah directly. And with Sher Ali, the assassin of Lord Mayo, his motive remained a mystery, and they couldn't find any link to the Wahhabi leaders in India.
So maybe convenient scapegoats or just general paranoia?
Perhaps a bit of both. But regardless, the British police were relentless. They launched major investigations and put the network on trial. Famous cases in Ambala and Patna in the 1860s.
And the outcome?
Severe punishments. Leaders were imprisoned, many transported for life to the Andamans, that penal colony. By the 1880s, the militant, confrontational side of the movement was effectively crushed. They stamped it out.
Okay, so the military campaigns failed. The underground network was eventually dismantled. But what about the ideas? Did they just disappear? What was the lasting impact of all this on the subcontinent, especially on Muslim identity?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? About the long-term echoes. Because even though the British stamped out the militant side, that whole period, the early 19th century, is described as a time of social and religious awakening.
Ah, okay.
There was this growth of a new spirit focused on upliftment, on reform. Barelvi's work, making Islamic texts accessible in Persian and Urdu, that had a lasting impact. It helped restore the confidence of Muslims, gave people inspiration for, leading a pure life as they saw it.
So it boosted morale and provided a framework, even if the political project failed.
Exactly. And thinkers like Barelvi, they were among the first Muslim thinkers to state the decline of Mughal empire, clearly, and argue that something needed to change religiously, socially, politically.
So it fostered this deeper sense of a distinct community identity. Not necessarily about demanding a separate state then, but a recognition of shared interests, shared challenges.
Precisely. That awareness of being a distinct community facing decline and external pressures, that resonated long after Bellicott. It cultivated this idea that Muslims were distinct, maybe even a separate nation in some sense.
And that connects to later ideas.
It certainly seems to. That intellectual current feeds into what people like Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan would later argue more explicitly. He's famous for saying in 1868 that Hindus and Muslims were two different nations.
Ah, the two-nation theory.
It's one of the streams flowing into that,
Yeah.
yes. The idea that Muslims constituted a separate nation, needing its own political expression, eventually leading to the demand for Pakistan. So the seeds planted by Barelvi and others, even in defeat, had these incredibly long-term consequences.
Wow. It really shows how history isn't just about the winners and losers of battles. It's about these powerful ideas, these organized efforts that can survive, adapt, and reshape societies generations later.
Absolutely, often in ways the people who started them could never have imagined.
It's quite a story. From the battlefield at Balakot, through those secret networks, sending coded messages and gold coins, right up to these fundamental shifts in identity. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that times of crisis can spark these deep awakenings.
Social, religious.
And that quest for identity, for revival, even if it hits a wall militarily, can still lay the groundwork for massive changes down the road.
Indeed. It really makes you think about how communities react when their world is changing. When old orders crumble and new powers rise, they often look inwards, don't they? They strengthen their shared values, they organize in these remarkable ways.
And those currents, as you said, flow for a very long time.
Much longer and deeper than any single battle or leader. They shape the collective consciousness.
So, thinking about all this, it really makes you pause, doesn't it? You look around today at different movements, different passions. What undercurrents are we maybe not seeing?
Right. What seeds are being planted now that might, reshape identities down the line in ways we can't foresee?
Exactly. How do these echoes of the past, these struggles for definition, these ways of organizing, how do they still play out in how groups see themselves, how we see ourselves today? Makes you think.